Okay, picture this. You are thinking of the 1990s. You're thinking of television. And almost instantly, an image pops into your head. It's a golden beach. The sun is just absolutely blazing. And running towards you, in what feels like impossibly slow motion, is this team of lifeguards in bright red swimsuits.
Yeah, it is. It's probably one of the most enduring, instantly recognizable images in the entire history of pop culture.
Yeah.
I mean, you could show that silhouette to someone in Tokyo, in Berlin, in Rio.
And they know.
They know exactly what it is. No translation needed.
Right. It's Baywatch. And for a lot of people, I think the memory of that show is, well, it's kind of a punchline, isn't it?
It really is. It gets filed under guilty pleasure or, jiggle TV.
Exactly. The cheese, the music video montages, the hair that just defies all laws of physics and humidity. It's so easy to just dismiss it as, fluff.
It is easy to dismiss, but it would be a massive, massive mistake to do so. Because if you actually ignore the reputation and just look at the raw data, Baywatch wasn't just a hit show. It was a phenomenon on a scale that it's almost impossible to comprehend in today's fragmented media world.
That's the thing.
At its absolute peak, this show was the most watched television series in the entire world.
The numbers are just staggering. We are not talking about Friends numbers or even Game of Thrones numbers in its heyday. We are talking about a weekly audience of over 1.1 billion viewers. It's not a typo, which is just, broadcasting in 144 countries, it is honestly mind-blowing when you stop and think about it.
It means that at one point in the mid-90s, roughly 1 in every 5 or 6 people on the entire planet was watching David Hasselhoff run on a beach every single week.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We have to figure out how. How on earth did a show that was actually canceled after its first season, literally left for dead by NBC, how did it rise from the ashes to become this global empire?
And not just how it succeeded, but how it evolved. We're going to trace that journey from, the beaches of Santa Monica to the budget-saving shores of Hawaii, and then we have to go into the truly bizarre spin-offs.
Oh, okay, I cannot wait.
The ones where lifeguards, for some reason, started fighting vampires.
I still can't quite believe that part is real, but I'm looking at the notes, and yeah. We're definitely getting there. And finally, we have to talk about that 2017 movie and why it felt so wrong compared to the original, why that tone just completely missed the mark.
Exactly. So we've got a massive stack of sources today to work from. We're pulling from production notes, viewership statistics that were actually verified by the Guinness World Records, some really detailed location guides from Gigster, Wikipedia archives on the series and its many, many spin-offs, and some really intense fan analysis from Reddit and various film blogs.
So let's unpack this, because the story of Baywatch isn't just a TV show. It's actually a high-stakes business thriller disguised as a beach party.
It really is. And to understand the miracle, you absolutely have to understand the disaster. It all starts with a massive, undeniable failure.
Okay, Section 1, the resurrection. So take us back. It's 1989, the Berlin Wall is coming down, Madonna is topping the charts, and Baywatch premieres on NBC. What was the initial concept?
Yeah, that's right. It debuted in September 1989. And it was created by a team, Michael Burke, Douglas Schwartz, and a man named Gregory J. Bonin. Now, Bonin is the key here. He was an actual, real-life LA County lifeguard.
So there was some authenticity baked in from the start.
A ton of it. He had been pitching a show about lifeguards for years because he lived that life. He saw his colleagues pulling people from riptides, dealing with real emergencies. He wanted to show the heroism of these first responders, that it wasn't just about getting a tan.
So the DNA of the show was authentic. It wasn't just some Hollywood writers guessing what it's like. It came from a guy who actually knew how the riptides worked.
Exactly. It had that core of authenticity. It had a big star in David Hasselhoff, who was coming off the global success of Knight Rider. It had this beautiful cinematic look. On paper, it should have been a hit. But it wasn't. But the audience just did not show up.
How bad was it, really? Was it just sort of mediocre, or was it a true bomb?
It was pretty catastrophic. In the seasonal ratings for the 1989-1990 season, out of 103 shows airing on television, Baywatch ranked 73rd.
Ouch. That is the very definition of on the bubble. You are not getting a second season with numbers like that.
No, it was a flop. And it gets worse. It wasn't just the ratings. The production studio, a company called GTG Entertainment, which was this joint venture involved with the Gannett Company, well, it actually went out of business.
The whole company folded.
The whole company folded.
Yeah.
The show was incredibly expensive to shoot. Shooting on or near water always is. You have the elements, you have salt water corroding your camera equipment, the need for safety divers, boat rentals. It's a logistical nightmare. Without the ratings to justify that cost, NBC pulled the plug after just one season. The math just didn't work.
So by 1990, Baywatch is dead. It's just another one-season wonder destined for the trivia bin, another forgotten show.
It absolutely should have been. In 99% of cases, that is precisely where the story ends. But there was one person who refused to let it go. And that was the star of the show, David Hasselhoff.
The Hoff, of course.
The Hoff. He saw something that the network executives at NBC didn't. He saw the potential, specifically in the international market.
Because of his music career.
Exactly. He had this massive, massive following in Europe, specifically in Germany, thanks to his pop music career and, of course, Knight Rider. He knew there was an appetite for this kind of glossy American imagery. So he teamed up with the original creators, Burke, Schwartz, and Bonan, and they decided to do something incredibly risky.
What was the plan?
They decided to revive the show themselves, without a network, for what's called the first-run syndication market.
Okay, we need to pause here and really dig into this term, first-run syndication, because we hear syndication all the time with old TV shows, when you see Seinfeld or The Office reruns on a local channel at 6 p.m.
Right, that's off-network syndication.
But that's for shows that are already done. What does first-run syndication mean in the context of producing a brand new show in 1991?
This is the absolute key to the whole empire, and it's a brilliant, gritty, almost insane business move. To understand why it was so crazy, you have to understand the TV landscape of 1991.
No streaming.
No streaming, no Netflix, no Amazon Prime to come in and swoop up your canceled show. There were just the big broadcast networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and maybe Fox. If NBC fired you, you were dead, period.
You couldn't just shop it around.
Not really. So first-run syndication was the Wild West. It was this alternative model that shows like Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Wheel of Fortune had used. But it was a massive gamble. Hasselhoff and his team couldn't just sell the show to one buyer like NBC.
So what did they do?
They had to effectively build their own network from scratch. They had to go to every single media market in America, station by station, and sell the show.
Well, so wait, you're telling me they're literally going door to door, like flying to Des Moines to talk to the manager of the local affiliate?
That is exactly what it looks like. It's a door-to-door sales pitch. You go to the station manager in Des Moines, then you fly to the station manager in Topeka, then Miami, then New York. You have to convince hundreds of independent station owners to buy your show and give you a good time slot.
That just sounds like a logistical nightmare compared to just having NBC air it nationally. You are acting as your own distributor.
It is a hustle.
Yeah.
A massive amount of legwork. And here is the genius part, how they financed it without a big network bank account. They used something called the barter system.
A barter system? For a TV show? How does that even work?
Well, they didn't necessarily ask these local stations for a big pile of cash up front to license the show. A lot of these stations couldn't afford that anyway. Instead, they essentially gave the show to these stations for free.
Free? But how does that pay for the slow motion cameras and the red swimsuits and everything else?
It pays for it with ad space. The deal was, we give you the tape of the episode for free. In a 1-hour show, there are, say, 12 minutes of commercials. You, the local station, keep 6 of those minutes to sell to your local car dealerships and furniture stores. And we, the producers, keep the other 6 minutes.
Ah, I see. And then Hasselhoff's production team takes those national ad slots and sells them to big brands like Coca-Cola or Mattel or Ford.
Precisely. It was a pure equity bet on themselves. If the ratings were low, those 6 minutes of ad time were worthless and they would go bankrupt very quickly. But if the ratings were high, they kept all that ad revenue for themselves with no network taking a huge cut.
That is an enormous gamble.
It's betting the farm. And Hasselhoff believed in it so much that he took a massive salary cut in exchange for the title of executive producer and, more importantly, a huge piece of the back-end profits. He was betting his career and his bank account on himself.
He's putting it all on red.
Literally red. And because they didn't have that bottomless NBC money anymore, they had to be incredibly, incredibly ingenious with the budget. Even with this barter system, cash flow was tight. They had to slash costs everywhere they could.
I read about the theme song switch. That was actually a budget thing. I always assumed it was just a creative choice.
Pure economics. The original NBC theme song was a track called Save Me by Peter Cetera.
The guy from the band Chicago, I mean, that's some high-end yacht rock royalty right there.
Very high-end. And very, very expensive in terms of royalties.
Yeah.
Every single time that song aired anywhere in the world, it cost them a significant amount of money.
When they went independent in 1991, they simply couldn't afford him anymore.
So they needed a cheaper option.
They needed a song they could control the rights to. So they switched to a song called I'm Always Here by Jimmy Jamison of the band Survivor.
Some people stand in the darkness. Oh yeah, I can hear it in my head right now. It's unforgettable. It became absolutely iconic. But it was a cost-saving measure at its heart. And that budget ingenuity bled into the entire visual style of the show, too. You mentioned the slow motion earlier.
Yeah, the slow motion running is the trademark.
And what about the music video montages? You know, those long segments where all the dialogue stops, a pop song kicks in, and we just see shots of the ocean, windsurfers, maybe a romantic walk on the beach at sunset.
Well, of course. I always thought that was just the 90s vibe. It felt very MTV inspired.
It was the vibe, but it was a vibe born of necessity. Think about it from a production standpoint. Shooting a 3-minute scene with dialogue is expensive. You need sound guys. You need multiple camera setups for coverage. You need multiple takes to get the lines right. You need continuity editors to make sure everything matches.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. But shooting B-roll of waves, crashing, and attractive people running on a beach, that's cheap.
Right, you don't need a boom mic to film a sunset. You just need one camera operator.
Exactly. It fills the runtime without burning through script pages or costly setups. A 3-minute montage eats up valuable showtime for pennies on the dollar compared to a 3-minute dialogue scene in the lifeguard tower.
That is actually brilliant. So the whole relaxing atmosphere of the show, that sort of hypnotic, ambient quality it had, was basically just creative filler to save money.
Precisely. But it worked. It accidentally created this unique, aesthetic, sunny, optimistic, rhythmic that people around the world absolutely loved. It turned a budget constraint into a signature style. You could argue it basically invented slow TV before that was even a term.
So they successfully resurrect the show in 1991 using this door-to-door sales model, and suddenly it just explodes. It goes from cancellation to being the biggest show on Earth. So let's move to section 2, the secret sauce. Why on earth did 1.1 billion people tune in every week?
Well, if you ask the average person on the street, they'll probably give you a one-word answer: sex appeal.
The Baywatch reputation.
Right. The cultural shorthand for the show is that it was made by men, for men, to oogle women in swimsuits.
Yeah.
That it was basically softcore eye candy with some occasional jet ski action.
And to be fair, the marketing didn't exactly shy away from that angle.
It certainly leaned into it, but when you look at the internal demographics and the market research the producers did, that assumption is almost completely wrong.
Really?
Yeah. According to their own data, approximately 65% of the Baywatch audience was female.
Wait, stop. Say that again. Nearly 2/3 of the audience were women. That completely flips the entire narrative of the show.
It does. And not just women in general. The primary, most loyal demographic was women aged 18 to 34.
That is not what I expected at all. So why? What was drawing young women to this show in such huge numbers if the cultural perception is that it's just for guys?
The sources, and a lot of the analysis since, suggest it was all about agency and empowerment. Think about the landscape of television in the late 80s and early 90s. In action shows, what were the roles for women?
Usually the damsel in distress, the girlfriend who gets kidnapped, the victim.
Exactly. They were often the plot device, not the protagonist. If a woman was in a bikini in an action movie back then, she was usually being dragged away by a bad guy. She was the loot. She was screaming for the hero to come help her.
Right.
In Baywatch, the female lifeguards, characters like Stephanie Holden, C.J. Parker, Shawnee McClain, they were professionals. They were the ones doing the saving.
They were the heroes.
Exactly. They were heroic. They were strong. They were physically capable. They were treated as professional equals to the men on the team. They weren't waiting for Mitch Buchanan to save them. They were diving into riptides. They were piloting the rescue boats, and they were wrestling sharks right alongside them.
So it was aspirational. It presented this image where you get to be the hero and you get to look great on the beach doing it. It wasn't an either.
It was almost a precursor to the girl power movement of the late 90s, the Spice Girls and all that. But it was packaged in a format that tricked the network executives and advertisers into thinking it was just for guys. It offered this vision of female competence and heroism that was actually quite rare on television at the time.
That's a fascinating pivot on the whole male gaze theory. Visually, it might have catered to it, but narratively, it was actively subverting it.
Precisely. And there's another huge factor to that global success, which we touched on before, the universal language of the show.
You don't mean literally English, you mean the storytelling itself.
I mean the language of the storytelling. Baywatch plots were incredibly visual and incredibly simple. Consider a standard episode's A-plot. Someone is drowning. A shark is attacking. An earthquake hits the pier. A boat capsizes.
The stakes are primal.
They're primal and they're visual. You don't need to understand complex dialogue or nuanced American cultural references to understand that someone needs to be pulled out of the water. A rescue is a rescue in any language. Life or death.
That makes so much sense. That's why I could play in Germany, in the UK, in Brazil, in the Middle East without losing anything in translation.
Exactly. It offered this pure, unadulterated, sunny vibe escapism. The aesthetic of 90s California, the endless summer, the neon fashion, the relentless optimism, that was an export product. It was selling a specific version of the American dream, one based on leisure, beauty, and heroism.
It really was the ultimate background show, wasn't it? In the best possible way. You could tune in halfway through, see a music montage, see a rescue, and you immediately get it. You feel good.
And that feeling of comfort is the key. It wasn't trying to challenge you. It was trying to reassure you, I'm always here. Right? The theme song literally promises that you are safe. In a chaotic world, 1.1 billion people apparently wanted to know that the lifeguard was watching over them.
Okay, so we have the brilliant business model. We have the unexpected audience psychology. Now let's talk about the people on the screen. Section 3, the ensemble.
Right. Baywatch functioned very much like a classic soap opera. It had what we call a revolving door cast.
I was looking at the cast list for this deep dive, and it's wild. By the end of the 11-season run, not a single one of the original cast members from season 1 remained. Even Hasselhoff left before the very, very end.
He did, but for the vast majority of that run, Mitch Buchanan was the anchor, the constant. And this character is so interesting because he subverted a very popular trope of the 90s.
Yeah.
The useless TV dad.
Oh, yeah. Like Al Bundy in Married with Children or Homer Simpson. The bumbling, incompetent father figure who was always the butt of the joke.
Exactly. The 90s loved the idiot dad. But Mitch was the complete opposite. He was a single father to his son, Hobie, and he was portrayed as incredibly competent, caring, and morally centered. He was a mentor to the younger lifeguards and a devoted, present dad. He cooked, he gave life advice, he was emotionally available.
His role model.
He was. And speaking of Hobie, that's a classic soap opera move right there, the recasting.
Right, the Darren Stevens effect.
It's what soap opera fans call SORAS, soap opera rapid aging syndrome.
I love that term. That's fantastic.
In season 1 on NBC, Hobie was played by a young actor named Brandon Call. But then for the syndicated run, he was recast with Jeremy Jackson, who then played the role for years and years.
Right, that changed.
The sources say the original actor grew up too fast during the hiatus, or was busy with other projects like Step by Step. But Jeremy Jackson really became the definitive Hobie. The audience grew up with him as he went from a little kid to a teen heartthrob in his own right.
But we can't talk about the cast without talking about the bombshell arrival in season 3.
Pamela Anderson as CJ Parker.
Right. The sources we looked at all cite her arrival as a fresh beginning for the show. What did she bring to it?
She joined in 1992, and she just brought a level of global fame and media visibility to the show that was completely unprecedented. She became the face of the brand, an international icon. Her red swimsuit is literally in the Smithsonian Museum of American History.
No way!
Yes. That is how culturally significant her tenure on that show was. She defined the look and feel of that mid-90s era.
But looking beyond the really famous faces, I found the character of Numi to be really interesting. Because he wasn't really an actor, was he?
This is one of my favorite details about the show's production. Michael Newman, who played the character Numi, he was a real-life, honest-to-God LA County lifeguard. He was also a firefighter.
So how did he end up on camera?
He started as a technical advisor and a stuntman for the show. He was the guy making sure the rescues looked authentic. But because the rescues required very specific skills, driving the Scarab boats at high speed through waves, using the rescue cans properly, managing the lines in the water, they just kept putting him on camera.
Because the actual actors couldn't do it convincingly.
Exactly. Or it was too dangerous for them to do.
Oh.
Newbie was the only one who looked like he knew what he was doing because he actually did know what he was doing.
Yeah.
So eventually the writers just gave up and said, okay, you're a character now.
That is hilarious. So he basically saved his way into a SAG card.
He did. He eventually became a recurring character with lines and his own plot lines, basically playing a version of himself. And it was smart because it added this crucial layer of grounding reality to all the heightened drama.
And on the topic of reality, we should touch on the inclusivity aspect.
Yeah, the Reddit threads we looked at really highlighted this. For a show that gets constantly criticized for being superficial and all about physical perfection, it actually dealt with disability and diversity quite often.
In what way?
The show had these recurring storylines that featured children with disabilities, Special Olympics athletes, and people from diverse backgrounds. Hasselhoff's character, Mitch, was often the champion of these characters, integrating them into the beach life, treating them with dignity. It was a weirdly progressive and heartfelt element in a show that is so often dismissed as being shallow.
Okay, so the show is a massive global hit. It's an empire. And like any empire, it tried to expand. And this is where things get, frankly, deeply weird. Section 4, expanding the universe.
Or, as I like to call it, the era of lifeguards fighting vampires.
Please explain Baywatch Nights. I watched a clip of this on YouTube before our dive, and I honestly thought it was a Saturday Night Live parody. It can't be real.
Oh, it's very real. So, in 1995, the producers thought, Mitch Buchanan is so popular, people love him, let's give him a night job.
Yeah.
So they created a spin-off called Baywatch Nights, where Mitch, after a long day of lifeguarding, opens up a private detective agency.
A lifeguard detective, okay. It's a stretch, but I can kind of go with it. Magnum P.I. was popular, I get the impulse.
And season 1 was exactly that, a standard, slightly noirish detective show. It was a bit cheesy, the ratings were soft, it wasn't a huge hit. But then, a show called The X-Files became this massive cultural phenomenon on Fox.
Right. Everybody was watching Mulder and Scully.
Everybody. And the producers of Baywatch Nights, in a move of what I can only describe as pure, unadulterated desperation, decided to pivot.
How hard of a pivot are we talking about here?
A 180-degree handbrake turn pivot. In season 2, Baywatch Nights abandoned the detective format and became a full-blown sci-fi horror series.
No, you're kidding.
I am not. And we have to pause here because this is arguably the single strangest tonal shift in the history of television. Mitch Buchanan, the guy whose primary nemesis is usually a dangerous riptide or a shark, was suddenly, week after week, fighting ancient Vikings that had thawed out of glaciers.
You are making this up right now.
I am not, I swear. He fought sea monsters, he fought human-fish hybrids, and yes, in one infamous legendary episode, he fought vampires.
Yeah.
Actual vampires. On a boat.
I'm staring at the notes here in disbelief. Did the main show Baywatch Prime ever acknowledge this?
Yeah.
Did CJ ever ask Mitch, hey, why do you look so tired? And he says, oh, I was up all night staking a nest of the undead.
For the most part, they kept the two universes separate, which almost makes it even weirder. It was like Mitch was having this secret schizophrenic break every night that nobody talked about. But occasionally, Mitch would show up at the lifeguard tower in the main show with a bandage on his neck and make a vague, tongue-in-cheek comment about a vampire attack and just wink at the audience who was in on the joke.
That is amazing. It sounds like a complete fever dream. It's like they put two different shows in a blender.
It was pure ratings desperation. They looked at their numbers, they looked at Mulder and Scully's numbers, and they said, screw it, give the lifeguard a wooden stake, and let's see what happens.
That pitch meeting must have been absolutely incredible. Just a room full of television executives nodding seriously and saying, yes, sea monsters, it's the logical next step for the lifeguard detective.
But eventually, the party in LA had to end, even for the main show. Talk to us about the move to Hawaii.
Right, eventually the sunny vibes just got too expensive, even for a global hit.
By 1999, the production landscape had changed. Shooting in Los Angeles had become prohibitively expensive. The union costs, the location permits, it was all adding up. And the international syndication market was shrinking a little bit. To keep the machine running, they needed to cut costs again.
So they looked for a new location, a new beach.
Initially, their first choice was Australia. They filmed a whole pilot for a version called Baywatch Down Under. They thought, great beaches, English speaking, it's a perfect fit. But the local residents of Avalon Beach, north of Sydney, actually protested.
Really? They didn't want the most popular show in the world setting up shop.
They banned the production. The local council voted against it. It was a huge cultural clash. They viewed Baywatch as tacky, overly American, and intrusive. They didn't want the whole circus in their quiet town. It was a massive public embarrassment for the production.
Wow. Getting kicked out of Australia, that's almost a badge of honor in a weird way.
So, with Australia off the table, the state of Hawaii stepped in. They saw the tourism potential and offered the show massive financial incentives to relocate. And thus, Baywatch Hawaii was born. This was the era of the yellow swimsuits.
In a darker tone, right? The notes say the vibe changed.
Much darker, yeah, more serious. The cast was almost completely overhauled. And this is where David Hasselhoff finally exited the series.
How do you write out the main character of a show that's been on for a decade? Does he just retire and open a surf shop?
No, this is Baywatch. You have to do it with an explosion.
Of course you do.
In the season 10 finale, Mitch is tracking down some eco-terrorists on a boat, because of course he is, and he's caught in a massive underwater explosion. He was presumed dead.
Presumed. That leaves some wiggle room.
A lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
In the 2003 reunion movie, they retconned it and said he just had amnesia and was living as a fisherman somewhere. But for the purposes of the series, that was the violent, explosive end of the Mitch Buchanan era.
And before we move on to the modern movie, we have to briefly mention Thunder in Paradise.
Oh, absolutely. It's the spiritual cousin to Baywatch. Same creators, Burke, Schwartz, Bonan. But instead of David Hasselhoff on a beach, you have Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan on a boat.
A high-tech, talking, indestructible mercenary boat named Thunder. It's the exact same DNA as Baywatch. Action, sun, muscle, very simple good versus evil plots. It just proves that the creators really believed they had a formula, Baywatch, but with X, that could be applied to anything.
Baywatch on a boat, Baywatch at night as a detective, Baywatch at night as a vampire hunter. They were trying to franchise the vibe itself.
They really were.
Okay, so let's jump forward. We go from the early 2000s, the franchise has been dormant for a while, and then in 2017, Hollywood decides it's time for a reboot. A big-budget movie starring arguably the biggest star in the world, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Zac Efron.
And this brings us to Section 5, the tonal whiplash. This is really a fascinating case study in how not to adapt a beloved, if cheesy, property.
I remember seeing the trailers for this. It looked very different from the show. It was raunchy.
It was a hard R-rated comedy. And that right there is where the fundamental disconnect happened. The original Baywatch, for all its cheese, for all its slow-motion montages, was completely earnest. It took the job of lifeguarding seriously. It had heart. Mitch cared about those kids on the beach.
And the movie?
The movie was completely cynical. It was ironic. It spent its entire runtime mocking the very concept of Baywatch. It was full of graphic language, raunchy humor, and what one reviewer accurately called an endless stream of wiener jokes.
So it was trying to be 21 Jump Street. That's the vibe I got.
Exactly. That is the comparison everyone makes. The filmmakers saw how successful the 21 Jump Street movie was, a movie that lovingly parodied its goofy source material, and they tried to copy that formula. But 21 Jump Street felt affectionate in its parody. Baywatch 2017 felt mean-spirited.
Like it was embarrassed to even be a Baywatch movie.
Yes, that's the perfect way to put it. It was laughing at the source material, not with it. And critics absolutely destroyed it for that. It has an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. They argued that the movie felt cold and detached. There's a character, Ronnie, who exists purely as the fat guy trope, just there for gross-out, awkward humor. It felt cruel in a way the original show never, ever was.
But here's the crazy part. Did it flop at the box office?
Paradoxically, no. And this brings us right back to the incredible power of that brand. It made $177 million worldwide on a budget of about $69 million.
So the brand is basically bulletproof. Even a critically panned movie makes $100 million in profit.
Even a bad Baywatch movie makes money. It proves that the global pull of that name and the simple promise of sun, sand, and action is still absolutely massive.
So what about the legacy of the original show today? You mentioned they did a remaster.
Yes. Very recently, the entire original syndicated series was remastered into beautiful HD and widescreen. And it looks fantastic. The colors of the ocean and the swimsuits really pop. It's never looked better. But there's a small tragedy attached to it.
The music.
The music. Because of the incredibly complex music rights issues, they couldn't relicense all those original pop songs from the 90s that filled the montages. It would cost millions and millions of dollars today. So they had to replace them with sound-alikes.
Oh, no. So it's not the original songs. It's like generic elevator music.
It's better than elevator music, but it's generic pop tracks that sound vaguely like the original hits, but just aren't quite right. So if you watch the remaster today, you're seeing this crystal clear picture, but the vibe is slightly off because the entire soundtrack has been surgically altered. It's a huge point of contention for purists.
That's a real shame. The music was such a huge part of that relaxing, hypnotic atmosphere we talked about. It's like replacing the smell of the ocean with a cheap, scented candle.
It really is. It fundamentally changes the texture of the show.
So we've gone from a canceled NBC flop to a billion weekly viewers to vampire detectives, all the way to a cynical movie reboot. It has been a wild, wild ride.
It's a completely unique trajectory in television history. It really shows the power of ownership, the power of a simple universal idea, and the power of pure hustle.
So let's try and summarize this in the outro. What is the big overarching takeaway here?
I think the big takeaway is that Baywatch was not an accident, and it wasn't just jiggle TV. It was a business miracle, driven by that incredibly risky syndication gamble. And it succeeded on a global scale because it offered something universal: heroism, optimism, and beauty, all wrapped in a sunny, accessible package. It appealed across genders and borders in a way very few shows ever have.
And it brings us to a final question, I think. We live in this era of prestige TV. Everything is dark, it's gritty, it's morally complex, it's serialized. We watch The Bear or Succession or Severance. It's all very, very good, but it's all very stress-inducing.
And our reboots are often cynical, like we saw with the 2017 movie. They're free to be sincere.
Exactly. So here's the provocative thought to leave you with. Is the world actually ready for a sincere return to Baywatch?
That really is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we, as a modern, media-savvy audience, accept earnest cheese anymore? Could we watch a show about good-looking lifeguards who just want to save lives and do the right thing without a layer of irony or darkness or some hidden trauma?
I honestly don't know the answer, but looking at the state of the world, maybe a little uncomplicated, sunny optimism is exactly what we need right now.
I wouldn't bet against the Hoff.
Never bet against the Hoff. That's it for this deep dive.
Keep swimming.
See you on the next deep dive.